Hi everyone, this is part two of a two-part video series showing how I use Desmos Polygraph and Activity Builder for geometry class. So in part one, I went through how to use teacher.desmos.com polygraph activities for geometry, and in this part I'm going to focus more on using Activity Builder. So in general, when you compare Desmos to GeoGebra, GeoGebra kind of limits you to doing one activity at a time, whereas Desmos allows you to embed several activities into the same lesson. And you can also mix in graphing activities, multiple choice questions, and a variety of different things, all of which can be applied to geometry class. It also allows you to transition back and forth between whole group instruction versus self-paced work. So you can allow students to move through your activity at their own pace, or you can force them to all be looking at the same screen at the same time. And it also lets you put like a graph overlay of your entire class, all of their graphs overlaid together on the screen, so you can compare where people are at and let them see one another's results and maybe tweak their own answers accordingly. You can do similar things with showing written response questions all on the board. You can even have a setting where students can see one another's written response questions after they've input their own. I also like that you can have students finish your activity for homework, and you can check whether or not they did it by going back into the lesson and viewing their progress bars. And as we look at a couple examples here, I'll show you exactly what that looks like during some geometry lessons. But first, here are some sample activities, some of which I made and some of which I found related to geometry class. So distance between parallel lines is one that I made, and this one focuses on looking at the distance between lines. So you can look at a student preview if it's an activity of someone else's, and this shows you that I have 10 screens or 10 slides in this particular activity. Tips for teachers are things that the person that created the lesson wrote. So I started off with some straightforward horizontal pairs and then switched into some slanted lines and another horizontal pair. I probably could have thrown some vertical in there. The idea was to get them thinking about distance between parallel lines and the importance of it being perpendicular. And at this point, they're going to start writing the perpendicular equation. So it has some nice linear equation review built in to the geometry lesson. They explain why they chose their equation. And they have on this screen to come up with two different perpendicular lines. So that way they could have to justify their reasoning about slope, but having different intercepts. And you can have them have some written response at the end. So that's one sample activity. Sector area is an activity that Desmos created. So it uses some features that are not yet available for public, like teachers making their own to just come up with. So that's why when I click edit, it says that I can't edit it because this activity uses features that are not publicly available. But that's fine because it's awesome as it is. And this has a nice progression of having students estimate area of a sector. It tells us that the circle is 20 units. It tells us that we want to create a sector with an area of about 8. So a student would have to think about proportion of the circle, hopefully think kind of about central angles. And we have some similar things there. It's going to show us the class average error, which is definitely a feature not available when you're creating your own. Looks like we go through something similar here for arc length, and so on. So that's obviously an awesome application of using Desmos for a geometry lesson, sector area and arc length. Equations of circles and transformations of equations. This one I made myself and made a notes handout to go along with it because I found that with some lessons, students would move through their Desmos activity, and for whatever reason, they think that if they're doing work on the computer, that they don't have to write anything down. So I started creating handouts to go with my lessons. So, for example, In this particular activity, a student is first given a circle and they are told to translate the circle and record some information. And what they actually end up seeing on their handout is a space for them to, for this slide, write down the given equation, the given center they can figure out from the graph or from the equation, depending on when in the unit you choose to use this, their radius, and then they write their new center after translating and their new equation after translating. Then the activity switches into a dilation sample. So this time we have the equation given and it tells me to dilate. So they have to think about not just the equation but the radius. This year I chose to do this lesson before I taught them what the parts of a circle equation represented, so they could kind of look at the graph and figure it out. Obviously that's optional depending on how you choose to go about it. But again, I had on the worksheet a space for them to write their given equation, the original radius, dilated radius, and then their equation after dilating. And I threw in a little bit of written response about whether or not circles are similar and why, congruent, and why. So this goes on to some slightly more complicated examples where they have to do both translation and dilation in the same step. Or with the same circle, I should say, and eventually write down some rules for how the equation of a circle works. Lastly, I wanted to briefly show you a card sort. So in a card sort, students have a stack of cards, and what they do is they drag around the cards and make groups, and the groups snap together when you put them on top of each other. So this is triangle congruence. I have an AAS pair, so I'm going to snap that onto the AAS heading. I'm looking to see what else we have here. Here's a side-side-side pair. Here's an ASA pair. And here's a not congruent because there's not enough information. So students snap their cards together. Teachers actually have an option of having an answer key appear on the teacher screen. So you can, as you see here, create this with images or with text. Whatever you want to put into a card sort is just another option of things you can do for geometry with Desmos Activity Builder. When it comes time to make your own, I first went to make this video and saw that there's actually now a multiple choice feature, which I feel like every time I go into Desmos Activity Builder, there's something new added that wasn't there last time I made one, which is awesome. It means that I feel like I need to revise ones that I've made in the past, but it's great that they keep adding these wonderful features for teachers to use. And one of those things that's hopefully coming out soon will be the ability to hopefully embed some Desmos geometry into Activity Builder. I don't know when, if ever, this would be happening, but this would be a fantastic marriage of Desmos with something like GeoGebra, because like I said before, GeoGebra is great. However, you can only go one activity at a time. So this feature would be just a fantastic addition to Desmos Activity Builder. Hopefully that's going to come out soon. And if you're looking for more help on how to create things in Desmos, they have a site that is learn.desmos.com. So here's a link to just some information about your geometry beta, creating your own activity, professional development for your school. If you're a teacher at your school that is interested in this and you just don't have access to a lot of PD on it already, there's some pre-made PD packs, or you can request PD from Desmos. And then one last thing briefly to show you, when it comes to creating an activity builder activity, you will go to your Desmos account, custom, new activity. And sometimes when you first start making an activity, you don't necessarily have the card sort and marble slides labs available. I have personally never used marble slides because I have only taught geometry for the past couple years since Desmos has been gotten really big. If you don't have the labs tab at all, what you need to do is from the Desmos homepage, under your name, there's an option for Desmos Labs. And if these are unchecked, you need to check them in order to make the marble slides and card sort available to you. And just like with so much stuff, if you're signed in with Google, it automatically saves everything. I'm going to go back into editing this activity just to show you some options that you have available. You can show graphs. You can put in the multiple choice, which was what I was mentioning earlier, is such a great new option. You can put multiple things into the same problem. And you just keep adding new screens for whatever you want it to show. With graphs, you can have the next slide have the choice of showing the previous, showing the responses of other students. You can also have the previous graph show up, so copy previous. You can have it actually show the graph that the student did in the previous slide. So if you want to have them in one slide graph something, and in the second slide answer questions about their graph while looking at it and not having to click back and forth, that's a great feature that Desmos has available for you. All right, so that is the basic overview of how I like to use Desmos Activity Builder for geometry class. Again, part 1 of this video series shows how I like to use Polygraph. And please, if you have questions, feedback, or examples that you'd like to share with me, please contact me through Twitter, my email, or through my blog. Thank you for watching.